What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to SEC Talk. Hope everyone had a very good weekend. And once again, we have to move our show to Wednesday, but next week we'll be back on our Tuesday slot. But back with me once again, week number 9. Wade, how you doing? That you went to the LSU game at the Storm of the Fields. I bet you had a
Yeah.
wonderful weekend.
Yeah, hard to top that. Couldn't ask for much more as an SEC football fan. Always cool when you get to go on the field. We'll debate on whether or not it was storm worthy or not, but we'll recap the big win. And then Tyler and I had a fun time last week. We went to a live streaming of a podcast. Tyler's rocking the shirt and got to talk directly with SEC legend Aaron Murray and former LSU Tiger T-Bob Abear. So it was cool to pick those guys' brains. They do this for a living, and they've been out there on the field. So we had a good time talking with those guys.
Yeah, really cool to post a personal to some of two of the greatest SEC. What Aaron Murray did with Georgia. Breaking records. There's I have to give Wade his props. There are questions surrounded by the SEC, and he did that. So he definitely has some credibility in the SEC trivia. He
Yeah.
helped with
Danny
SEC
Werfel.
trivia.
That's a good
Yeah.
good go-to answer. Danny Werfel.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's waste no time and get right into our content here on SEC Talk. We're going to get into SEC team as the college football playoff poll. Usually that will be in November, so hopefully, probably, I would say that either the first or the second week of November, it usually comes up. So we do have some new SEC teams, so that's always good to see. Number one, Georgia, they stayed the same after their big win this weekend, and then number three, Tennessee, they had really a cupcake game. They handled the business against UT Martin. Number 6 is Alabama. They remain there after their huge win against Mississippi State. We see a team fall from 7 to 15, Ole Miss after the 45-20 loss in Baton Rouge, and then we see a new face back in the poll. We saw LSU for 1 week after they got by Tennessee, so we didn't see them for a couple of weeks, but they're back at number 18. We see number 19 Kentucky, and then finally, this is
What
well
is
deserved.
that?
I think
What is that? South
that's
Carolina
South
in the
Carolina
poll.
ranked.
All right.
I've been, to be honest with you, I've been seeing a lot of people that are saying that South Carolina isn't deserved to be ranked, but that is just absurd to me. I think that South Carolina, their two losses, to Arkansas was early in the season. Georgia, is the Georgia team that's probably not going to be beat unless it's Tennessee coming into their place. But I think that this South Carolina program is heading in the right direction with Shane Beamer. I think, them being only 2 losses, ranked number 25, and shoot, they have everything in front of them right now. They still have to play Georgia, still have to play Tennessee, and then they got Clemson as well. They have Tennessee and Clemson to end the season. So everything's in front of the South Carolina team. They're still outside shot. This is a big if, but they can. This team could still head to Atlanta if things go their way.
Well, they would need a Tennessee upset of Georgia and then an upset of Tennessee on their own right for that to happen. And I think someone else would have to take down Georgia too. But yeah, South Carolina's got some big games left. But they still have the likes of Missouri this weekend and Vanderbilt on that schedule as well. So there's a good chance for South Carolina to finish 8-4, I would say, certainly, and they still play Florida as well, so that game could kind of go either way. But at this point, South Carolina looks really good. I think they'll finish 8-4, which is actually 2 games better than I predicted them in the preseason. So really big strides for the Gamecocks, and good momentum under Shane Beamer to be back in the polls.
Yeah, your dad hops in and says, "Go Gamecocks!" Been quite some time since they've been in AP ranking. Yeah,
I mean,
I
they
think
were a
since
fixture in the polls in the early 2010s. I had the privilege of following the team a lot back then, going to a lot of games and some bowl games with my dad and grandfather. And it's good to see South Carolina back on that level. I think, all of our college years, it was tough seeing them kind of rebuild and fall behind Clemson. But maybe this is the year the Gamecocks get it going.
Yeah, it's 8-4. We'll take it. I would like us to get to Florida January 1st. Yeah, that would be now. It's not the Outback Bowl anymore. They just call it the ReliaQuest Bowl. So yeah, I think that
Another insurance or financial provider, huh?
yeah, absolutely. All right, so
One more
we'll get
state.
to South Carolina here in the show. They have a big game this weekend against Missouri, and then we'll get to their game against Texas A&M. But before that, we have a reminder. If you have any questions, feel free to leave us a comment. Our reminder is brought to you by Fanatics. I know our boys on Sports Girl will miss me of our code, but I'm here today, and the code today is CARVE, not no wacky like 34 bold or no gore that we had last week. You get 65% off. You can use CARVE today. You have a couple of hours left, so you can use our link there that you see on the screen. So let's get into our next segment here, which is SEC Fantasy. That's presented by Buffalo Bayou Brewing Company, and they are going to be bumping Saturday night when the Phillies take on the Houston Astros. That should be a very good series. I think at the end of the show, we'll give our World Series predictions just because the World Series is also a big event. I know last year, us being Braves fan, that was a whale of a time. So I'm sure that both fan bases are really riled up. So I'm sure that Buffalo Bayou Brewing Company is going to be packed. We'll have to see if Chet's going to hop on over there on Friday night. We'll have to see. But if you ever head down to Houston, definitely be sure to check out Buffalo Bayou Brewing Company. They have it all. All right, let's get into the SEC Fantasy to see how our teams did. But before we get into that, our rules, we'll do this really quick. One quarterback, one running back, a receiver, a defense. Weekly rule, we cannot pick the same player back-to-back weeks. All right, well, it was good and bad for SEC Fantasy, especially for my team, but you got the job this week. Both defenses really struggled, but it looks like, once again, Jalen Hyatt, it was the man of the hour.
Yeah, he saved me. Quite the encore performance to his Alabama performance. He didn't quite have 5 touchdowns, but the yardage was right there. Leading the pack in the SEC with 174 yards. That game was kind of a shootout. Tennessee didn't necessarily have to play their top-notch defense to get the win, but they outpaced UT Martin through the air, led by Hyatt, 174 yards. Bryce Young, he had a good day against Mississippi State. They ran more of a balanced attack. He didn't have to do a ton. I mean, they won that game by 24 points, and Mississippi State was never in it because of a good defensive effort by the Bulldogs. So they were trying to run out the clock. A good defensive effort by the Crimson Tide against the Bulldogs. So Alabama just kind of was focused on running the clock down. Ray Davis, he went for 28 yards on the ground. He was kind of a project pick for me. Get a new guy on the show. I thought he would have a good game against Missouri. He couldn't really get it going. He averaged like 1.7 yards a carry, so that's pretty bad for him. But the South Carolina defense, they weren't incredibly efficient on yards let up, but they did have a good game against Texas A&M overall, limiting the Aggies' offense until the very end. Texas A&M put up some yardage late in the game. Ultimately, I was able to keep it in the positives at just 53 yards. So we've had better weeks, but good to be back above 0.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm the opposite. I was not above 0 this week. I was actually below 0 once again. And PSR is saying, let's go, Tyler. Well, my SEC fan needs to be on that same positivity. But in other words, I definitely go check out those guys. They do a fantastic job. Really good podcast over there. We've had a couple of appearances. So going to my team, Jaden Daniels, I wish we had that rule that you were thinking about of doing. We'll probably do it next year. But I really needed that rule of the total yardage because Jaden Daniels had over 100 yards rushing, but he had 248 yards passing. He had 5 total touchdowns combined. Marshawn Lloyd continues to be the leading back for South Carolina. I think that he's one of the most underrated backs in the SEC. There's a lot of hype with C-Rod, Devon Achane, but I think that Marshawn Lloyd is one of the better running backs in the country. 92 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dominique Lovett, wide receiver for Missouri, didn't really have a game. The other receiver that we'll get to, he had a better game. Only 12 yards, and the most disappointing to me is Tennessee's defense. Like, really, come on. 392 yards against UT Martin. I know that UT Martin was coming in here 4-2, but to give it that many yardage just really says about this Tennessee defense that they're lackluster. But their offense did get the job done. They did put up 62 points, but negative 40 yards as we see the wins week 8. So with that, let's go on to the week 9 SEC fantasy draft where Wade will have the first overall pick. We'll see where he goes. And he didn't use the first overall pick. He used it on the running back, but we'll see these two quarterbacks next week face off. So you got Stetson Bennett.
Yep, I'm going to go with Stetson Bennett against the Florida Gators. Actually, he might have been a sneaky pick next week or in 2 weeks against Tennessee. I could see that game turning into a shootout, but I'll go ahead and use him here against Florida. I mean, I think that the Bulldogs will just have their way with the Gators and should be able to spread it out to their trio of tight ends and maybe some dump off screens out of the backfield. They don't really have a wide receiver one, but Bennett does a good job of leading this offense. And I think he's a surefire candidate to go for over 250 yards. And I think that will be good enough to get the job done.
Yeah, Georgia doesn't really have a wide receiver one. They have a tight end one and a tight end two because that's pretty much who they throw to. I hate to burn Hendon Hooker right here, especially with Georgia coming up, but I just have to do it. I think really the best quarterback available this week. I thought about going with KJ Jefferson, but he's just been really inconsistent. So I'm going to go with Mr. Consistency here, go with Hendon Hooker. I need to get back into the positives. I think that he can do that against a Kentucky defense that, I mean, this is going to be one of the better defense Tennessee offense will face all season. I just don't know that if Kentucky's offense will be able to hang around, we'll have to see. But I think you got to just go with Mr. Consistency, go with Hendon Hooker. Coming off of a good game last week, I think he'll continue that in week number 2. And the running backs, we're both going to our bread and butter. You're going back with, once again, Raheem Sanders. Looks like he's Mr. Popular this year.
Yeah, I think he's right up there with Hendon Hooker and Will Rogers in appearances. You know, we do try to spread it around and cover all the teams. Kind of an unspoken rule. Of course, we have the rule that we can't pick the same guys in back-to-back weeks. But luckily for me, Raheem Sanders, I did not use him last week. I did use him against BYU a couple weeks ago. But I get him back this week after a pretty bad performance by my guy Ray Davis last week. So I'm looking forward to having the consistency of Sanders. Like you talked about with Hooker, I mean, Sanders is the most consistent running back, and he has a dream matchup against Auburn this week. Everybody's ran all over Auburn, no doubt about it. So this was kind of a dream pick for me. Took him number 1 overall.
Yeah, definitely a good pick there. And I think, after seeing LSU over Ole Miss's defense, I feel like this was a pretty easy pick for me going Devon Achane, Texas A&M. If we've been following Texas A&M's offense, the quarterback play has been up and down, but really the running back play, I mean, Achane has really been a lot for Texas A&M's offense, especially after Nia Smith went down injury and out for a season. We'll get more into Texas A&M, but I just love this matchup here. I think both of these running backs are going to have big days. Probably going to see a couple of touchdowns from these guys. So if this was regular fantasy, this would be a 20-point score. So I think these are going to be the two top running backs in the SEC this week when we come to recapping this week. So on to the pass catchers, and we go from some old faces to some new faces here in SEC fantasy with Barian Brown of Kentucky and Justin Shorter from Florida.
Yeah, we have all the experience in the world at quarterback and running back, but like you said, here's some new faces for you at wide receiver. Barian Brown has been Kentucky's leading receiver. Him and Devin Key have had pretty similar seasons, but Brown seems to have the edge, and minus a few outliers, he's been really consistent and going over 65 to 80 yards a game. Looking for his first triple-digit game on the season, and let's see it, under the lights at Neyland. This game could become a little high scoring. I flirted with the idea of selecting his quarterback, Will Levis, this week, but decided to, not double up on the Wildcats too much. I do think Tennessee will come out victorious there, but their defense sure, they're a little lackluster on defense. So I think the Wildcats will put up some points led by Barian Brown at receiver.
Yeah, I went with one of the top receiving for Florida. I think that going into this game against Georgia, they won't really necessarily be able to run the ball. I think that if they're going to really have a chance to keep this one close, Anthony Richardson's going to have to take some deep shots. And whenever that happens, Justin Shorter likes to go deep. He started his collegiate career at Penn State before transferring in for Florida. He's really been a bright spot on this offense. So I'm not really expecting big numbers. We'll just have to see. Maybe he gets a flash in the pan game. So two new faces. We'll see how they, if they do good, we're probably going to see them again here in 2022. So we're going to go to the most important of the SEC fantasy draft. We saw it in last week that both our defenses struggled. So we're going to go with a little risky pick. I think this is the riskiest defense to pick this week, but they are playing Auburn's offense that's been a little bit inconsistent. So tell us about the Hogs defense this week.
Well, preseason we thought Arkansas's defense would be a top 5 unit in the conference. They had a lot of returning talent, but losing to 2 safeties to LSU has really hurt the Hogs in their secondary. But they have a bounce back performance opportunity here against Auburn. Auburn really doesn't have much of an offensive identity. If they can run the ball with Tank Bigsby, that's fantastic for them. But if they have to air it out, I mean, it's just going to be a mixed bag. So I don't know. You got the 13th ranked defense here in Arkansas, but I think you have the 13th ranked total offense in Auburn. So one of the two's got to give, and I'm going to bank on it being a more defensive game.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with South Carolina. I mean, this defense, I know that they gave up 300 yards of off. Their defense, really kept their offense in that ball game. We'll get to that. But going into this matchup, this is a favorable matchup. Missouri's offense, looking at their games, their highest scoring game was 31 points against Abilene Christian. In other games, they've either scored like 17. They just scored like 17 against a Vanderbilt defense that wasn't so good. So I think that South Carolina's defense will be able to do a good job. So I think that we could have went with Georgia, the safe pick, but I think I like both of these picks. Giving both of these defenses some love. So maybe we'll see Georgia down the road, but for now we have South Carolina and Arkansas. So that is SEC fantasy draft going into week number 9. But before we get into week 9, we got more talk to do about week number 8, and that is recapping week and the SEC. So let's get off to the 11 a.m. game. This was an FCS versus SEC matchup. We probably won't get really much in depth of this talk. Just a quick recap. UT Martin travels to number 3 Tennessee. Tennessee puts up 65 points, but I think the really main concern is Tennessee's defense going forward. I know that they have a Kentucky, offense that really relies heavily on Chris Rodriguez. So, if C-Rod's able to get it going, then Kentucky could be, real dominant. So that's definitely a concern. What's not a concern is Jalen High. The past couple of weeks he's been having 7 receptions, 174 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He gets a week off from both of our SEC fantasy teams. So I would have to bet that he's going to be back when they play Georgia. So do you have any thoughts, on Tennessee just handling their business, or do you have the same concerns as me for their defense?
I think the defense is good enough to win most games, but if the offense ever kind of gets in a rut, the defense is going to have to step it up and shoulder some of the weight for the team. But, we've seen teams win with dominant offenses for a long time. Look back at some of those Clemson teams, Florida State, Auburn with Cam Newton, LSU with Joe Burrow. I mean, offense does reign supreme, I think, in college football. But you do have to have a really good defense. We saw Georgia win a national championship on defense last year. So, Tennessee's got to step it up at the times. But if they're scoring 65 points, no matter who it's against, I mean, we can't really nitpick them too much.
Yeah, especially when you score 65, no matter who you're playing, that's definitely a good feature to have if you're a top 3 team. So let's go on now to the 2:30 slate here, and that is number 7 Ole Miss traveling to Baton Rouge to face the LSU Tigers. And I'm going to give you the spotlight here. You were at the game, so you pretty much had the best seat in the house. So give us your thoughts on this game. Ole Miss, was up 17-3. LSU though, we've seen this team as it's just laughable at this time. Like LSU was down 13-0 against Mississippi State, 17-0 against Auburn, then obviously they were down against Tennessee. So give us your thoughts on this game, and then I'll go next.
Yeah, I mean the comeback kids, like you said, Ole Miss decided to come out aggressive. They won the coin toss and elected to take the ball first. And usually we don't see that pay off too well. But Lane Kiffin knew what he was doing, and he threw a 40-yard touchdown, or not a touchdown, but I guess down to the 2-yard line.
Yeah, it set him up.
To Jonathan Mingo. So that was a great way to seize momentum, quiet the crowd, and it did for a little bit. Ole Miss got up by 2 touchdowns, but Jaden Daniels just was really poised, and he didn't try to play outside of his game and took what was given to him on the ground. And eventually the LSU defense settled in like we've seen them do. And in the second half, I mean, oh my goodness, they couldn't have played any better defensively. So this team's special. I think they got a lot to play for. I don't know if they'll end up winning the SEC West or not, but I think they have a real good chance against Alabama after the bye week if they can really coach the team up this week. But I don't think this is where we saw LSU sitting after the season opener, or even after the Tennessee game. So this team continues to surprise, and it's kind of cool to see the SEC wide open.
Yeah, it was just a tale of the first half versus the second half. And once again, Jaden Daniels, I mean, it's just like week in and week out, he's just continuing to improve. I think the offensive line as well. And, they lost pretty much the whole entire offensive line last year. And it seems like, especially with Will Campbell and then Emory Jones, the left tackle and the right tackle, they are playing tremendous. And I've been, vying for this. Why haven't they been playing Harold Perkins? Because as soon as he stepped on the field, Ole Miss did not score a single point. And that it's just beyond me of I don't know if it's like a coaching scheme or not, or you just don't know the formation.
They don't trust them at the middle spot. And you got BJ Ojulari, who's your best defender. And a lot of the times there's only room for one outside linebacker. But, find a way to get some pressure on the left and right side is all I got to say, because you're absolutely right. He changed the game.
Yeah, but all in all, LSU's offense was able to get the job done. I mean, we saw, Kayshon Boutte get a couple of grabs too. He almost had a touchdown. He got close, and then just ran it in for a 4-yard touchdown to tie up the game, 17-17. So I bet Death Valley, the fans stormed the field, and we'll get to that. I know that you, I know that you saw. On Twitter, I saw it from Zach Von Rosenberg, a former LSU Tiger, saying that, Ole Miss is a little brother. LSU should. And I agree with you. I mean, I literally agree with everything that you said. The 2 past years of LSU football have been some of the worst since the Curly Hawks back in the day. I know that LSU fans of old, know what they're talking about. But, these past, 2 years, and, some of these, juniors and seniors, it's been, COVID restrictions. Like in 2020, it was really, empty crowds. It was 25%, and that continued on to 2021. I mean, the team wasn't great. So, if you want to roast the field, go for it. Who cares? Yeah. This is
part of the LSU experience,
Yeah. So, if you really have to gripe about that, then you're just, an old man just yelling, "Get off my lawn." But I agree.
What do they want? They want Orgeron back?
Yeah, I guess so. But I agree with my mom.
Beat Ole Miss last year.
Yeah, they got steamrolled last year, so they flipped the script. So my mom says, "Great LSU game. It was indeed." We almost thought about going to this game. We should have, but we'll see if there's another game on the schedule that we'll go to. So let's go on now to the next game of the week. And this was the battle of, like we mentioned, who gets last place in the SEC East. And it's looking like it's going to be Vanderbilt once again after Missouri beat them at home 17-14. This was a very defensive battle. 2 offenses that have been struggling. So, but Luther Burden, the player of the game for Missouri, that would have been the right Missouri Tiger receiver to take. Wouldn't have mattered. Probably would have got me out of the negatives at least, 66 yards and a touchdown. But what are your thoughts on this game? This was a very sloppy game from start to finish. And then get a win after, a couple of games where they probably won some games, but another close game for Missouri.
Yeah, they kind of finally ended up on the right side of things, as you mentioned. They had a few close losses. It amazes me that they were able to keep Georgia to a 5-point game, but couldn't score 20 against Vanderbilt.
Yes.
But it's just been kind of a ho-hum offense for Missouri. But it's good to see Luther Burden get it going. He was a 5-star recruit at receiver, and with how the transfer portal works and stuff these days, you can never be too sure. So you got to get these freshmen on the field early and often, and give them a vision to buy into, or else they might leave your program, especially like Missouri. They're kind of a rebuilding group. So good to see him involved. And yeah, unfortunately for Vanderbilt, they weren't able to carry over some of that early season momentum into SEC play. The offense just looks completely different, other than the Ole Miss game.
And the guy said at PSR, I'm the old man in the porch, so I guess they're not a fan of the Storm Field either. But we'll get into the next
if we
game.
can't
And
celebrate being a top 10 team, then what can we do?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
What message are you sending
that.
Brian Kelly? I mean,
Yeah.
is
I mean,
he
even Brian
supposed
Kelly,
to?
yeah. I mean,
Is he supposed to roll over and yell at the team for not winning by 30? I mean, I just don't know.
I don't know. It's just our society nowadays. So we'll get into our next game here on the slate, and this one was pretty expected. I mean, this was an Alabama team coming off of loss. Every time that this game comes around, Mississippi State is always coming on the wrong end where Alabama gets beat the week prior, and then just drops 30 points on them as Alabama's defense really shut down Will Rogers and Mississippi State. Mississippi State was shut out until pretty much the final possession whenever that Mississippi State scored a touchdown with the time expiring. But you see there, your quarterback, Bryce Young, was our player of the game. Jahmyr Gibbs really didn't do anything. He really wasn't much of a factor, only 30 yards rushing for him. But Bryce Young continued to pile on 249 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Alabama will head into the bye week with some momentum as they will now travel to LSU. We'll definitely get into that game. We have 2 big games in the SEC next week. Really, one for the SEC East and one for the SEC West. So I'm sure that you're not surprised by this outcome.
No, I mean, there was probably a sliver of hope for the Bulldogs in this one after Alabama got upset against Tennessee, but also you don't exactly want to play Alabama right after they just got kicked in the teeth. You knew they were going to come back pretty strong. So, not the best game we've seen from them, but pretty efficient and pretty dominant. I mean, they almost won 30-0. I think Mississippi State scored as time expired. That's why they ended up with 6 points. And I think I saw a video of Nick Saban being awfully upset about that. So that's kind of funny.
He was. I don't know what for. I guess he wanted the shutout bad.
Wait till the last second.
If I was a head coach, yeah. I mean, if I was a head coach, that's just typical Nick Saban, though. I mean, they could be up by 50 and he would still have be something to pissed about. But we'll go on to the primetime game. Give the South Carolina Gamecocks their spotlight as South Carolina won this one 30-24, and the scoreboard showed it really wasn't as close to the ball game as it really was. I mean, Sandstorm, the environment was just insane. I got to give it to South Carolina fans. They brought it on Saturday night, and it went off with a boom. Our kickoff return already 7-0 to put the Gamecocks up. And after 8 years of torment and losses to the Aggies, South Carolina finally slayed the dragon. We both called it last week on the show. So this was, just another, Texas A&M's defense was able to keep, their team in the game, but their offense just really couldn't move the ball really efficiently against South Carolina. On the other side, South Carolina, you see there, Marshall Lloyd, 2 touchdowns really was the X factor there. Spencer Rattler didn't throw any passing touchdowns, but, he was really consistent, found his open receiver. So really good win for South Carolina, and that's, one of the main reasons we see them ranked in the AP Top 25 poll.
Yeah, good job for the Gamecocks here. They did make it a little bit more stressful than they needed to at the end, letting up what we thought was a garbage time touchdown to the Aggies. But then Texas A&M was able to convert an onside kick, which made it all sorts of interesting, giving the Aggies a chance to go down there and win the ball game, but they weren't able to throw the Hail Mary 60 yards down the field. Luckily, the freshman hadn't been in the weight room for a whole year yet, so couldn't get it there, and South Carolina held on. But Shane Beamer is going to celebrate the win for sure, but I'm sure he's going to use this as a teaching moment as well that, hey, some teams are going to have the ability to beat us on that kind of play, and we got to play till the very end, because DJ Ungolongole can get that ball there, if this was the Clemson game or if this is Tennessee with Hendon Hooker. So, as this team's now ranked, they're going to be playing in some bigger ball games, and I think that if they can finish them, I mean, like we said, 8-4 seems within reach.
Yeah, you got to play 60 minutes. And yeah, I watched the whole entire game. I could not believe my eyes. I was like, you got to be kidding me. South Carolina's going to blow this, and it's just going to be Texas A&M winning. But yeah, you mentioned Haynes King got injured in that one. We saw the third string quarterback. I mean, this is just, we'll talk about the Texas A&M program as a whole once we get to the hot topics. But yeah, definitely a huge win for South Carolina going forward. And like we mentioned at the start, still everything in front of them for the South Carolina team. I can see them, 8-4 as well. And that would be huge for year two for Shane Beamer. All right, let's see how we did our week 8 in the picks. So we'll bring them up. Oh, actually, we have one more game. Sorry about that. Actually, no, scratch that. This was last week's game. Sorry about that. I forgot to delete these slides. Sorry about that. There we go. Week 8 pick 'em results, and you see right there, I went 9-0 to give me
nice
place. So our first undefeated.
First
so
perfection.
Definitely proud of that. So maybe I'll get a little bit risky this week. Maybe throw a little upset. So since I went 9-0, but
hey, you called the South Carolina upset. I mean, that was a little bit of going out on a limb, and you picked LSU to beat Ole Miss, so you mixed in some upsets.
Absolutely. You went 6-3, and Chet, a lot of upsets didn't work out in his favor as he finished 5-4, but I'm sure that he will bounce back in week number 9. So with that, we'll close week 8 and now turn our attention to week number 9, which is presented by Norse Beards. You can head on over to www.norsebeards.com and use promo code OC for 25% off your Beardsman products. All right, let's get now into the week 9 game in the SEC, starting with the 1 o'clock game here between Arkansas at Auburn. Really, both of these teams have been up and down. Arkansas started at the season, at one point they were the number 7 team in the country, and then straight before, beating BYU to end their losing streak. And then Auburn is just a program that has been on the decline. It's just a matter of time when we see Brian Harsin get kicked out the door. So in the battle of the Hogs and the Tigers, who are you going with?
Got to go with Arkansas in this one. I mean, I took Raheem Sanders in fantasy as well as their defense. And I think Arkansas really could make a statement and show that they're back to those preseason expectations. I mean, I think they could go on the road here and win 40-14 or something. But if this defense can't step it up, we could end up in a shootout. But I do think Arkansas will outpace Auburn. I mean, they're just not going to stop Raheem Sanders.
Yeah, I think that Arkansas is just a better football team. I mean, I could see this game, but I just don't really see it here. I mean, Auburn's offense, really the one game that their offense was good was the Ole Miss game where they put up 34 points. The other games, they really struggled. So I think that Arkansas's defense will show up in this one. Like you mentioned, they're able to stop Raheem Sanders. So I think that KJ, he's coming off of a game throwing 5 touchdowns before going into the bye week. So I think that this Arkansas team, got that win, got a win under their system. I think they built some confidence. So I'm going to go with the Hogs in this one. And Chet is going to go actually the opposite way. He's going to go with the Auburn Tigers, go with the home team. So we will see. I think that, if it loses this game, then, I mean, it's got to be time for Harsin, to get kicked out the door because, I mean, I don't know what they're waiting for. I mean, he's not the man for the job. So
they're trying to stretch the bill just a little bit more,
I guess
get a little bit more for what they paid for.
All right, let's get now into the next game here. The annual Florida versus Georgia, or Georgia, whatever you want to call it. game in Jacksonville. It's the annual rivalry game at the neutral site at the Jacksonville Jaguars Stadium. So Georgia is a 22.5 point favorite going into this one. We do know that Florida is coming off the bye, so is Georgia. So you're going to roll with, we're probably going to roll all G's unless one of us goes with the major upset.
Yeah, I'm definitely sticking with the Bulldogs. Fun fact, the Jaguars are all the way over in England, I believe. So interesting that is how that lined up. Definitely won't have a shared field over the weekend. Yeah, I think that Georgia just runs away with this one. I mean, this offense isn't too incredible, but they put up points and they win. And the defense really just built back a lot quicker than we all expected. And all of a sudden, they look like one of the most complete teams.
Yeah, I figured that you would go with Georgia, especially you taking Stetson Bennett, an SEC fan. See, I'm going to go with Georgia as well. I mean, Florida's defense has just been abysmal these last couple of weeks. So, the last game that we saw them on the field was against LSU, and LSU, put up 40 on them. So I think that Georgia's, offense, look for Stetson Bennett to find Brock Bowers, to find his receivers. So I think that Georgia's offense will be able to do whatever they want. I think that Anthony Richardson is pretty much going to be the key to the game for Florida. He has to have a big game. So I just don't really see that happening. I think that Georgia wins this one big. I don't really see this one. I just see this as a complete mismatch, especially in the coaching spot. I mean, Billy Napier coming from the Sun Belt, Kirby Smart and, the recruiting that he has done with his program. I think that Georgia, once again, is going to beat Florida in this rivalry game. So Chet is also going to go with the Georgia Bulldogs. So a clean sweep for the Dogs in the cocktail party down there in Jack. So now let's go on to the next game in the SEC East, and it's going to feature at number 25 South Carolina. So I'm sure that a lot of Gamecock fans see that ranking. I'm sure that they're going to pack Williams-Brice this weekend once again. So who you got in the Tigers versus the Gamecocks?
Well, we gave South Carolina a lot of praise. And I like that this game's in Columbia, South Carolina. If it was in Columbia, Missouri, we could be eating our tongue with a potential upset. But give me the Gamecocks on this one. I just think that Missouri's offense looks pretty bad. And South Carolina was actually going to be my pick for SEC Fantasy this week, even over Georgia. But I took the Gamecocks last week. So they were all yours for the week. And I think that will pay off for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna ride with the Gamecocks. Go with their, going with their defense. I need to pick them there. I think that Missouri's offense isn't that great. I think that South Carolina's offense will be able to score. I'd look for Spencer Rattler. Throw it in the air, and then Marshawn Lloyd is going to continue doing what he's been doing. I don't think that Missouri's offense is going to be able to score much against South Carolina. So look for South Carolina to win one by at least 2 touchdowns. I don't really see this one being close. You could see this one as a possible trap game. I don't really see it, especially being home, like you mentioned. If it was at the other Columbia, I would probably lean the other way. But I'm going to go with South Carolina, roll with Shane Beamer. And Chet is going to go with the Gamecocks as well. So clean sweep. Once again, still, only one discrepancy so far being that Auburn game. So we'll now go on to the night games here in week number 9. A lot of teams on the SEC is on the bye week, so less games this week once again. But this is going to be our game of the week here in SEC. Number 19, Kentucky at number 3, Tennessee. Both teams, still in SEC's contention, more of Tennessee. So this ring versus ring matchup. And another thing, Tennessee's uniforms this week. Whoo, boy, this must be like the cleanest ever.
Yeah, I like what they're rocking. Mine as well, with it being Halloween weekend. So, Tennessee's having a lot of fun with the season. You can tell that, and it's keeping the team loose. But they're still focused because they're a veteran bunch, led by Hendon Hooker and Cedric Tillman, and Hyatt's been there a few years. So they got their heads on straight, and I think that they'll weather the storm here. I don't think they'll be looking ahead too much to Georgia. I mean, this is always a pretty competitive series between the Vols and the Wildcats. I mean, pretty much back and forth in recent history. So Tennessee knows Kentucky can come in here and do some damage, but I think the offense will outpace Kentucky.
Yeah, that's my concern too. I think that Kentucky's defense, probably for about 2 quarters will be able to hang around. I think that Kentucky's offense, will be able to score. We've seen Tennessee's defense have lackluster performances against the rush, but I'm not picking Tennessee. I'm not picking Kentucky and Tennessee going with all black unis. I got to pick them just for that. Those got to be some of the cleanest uniforms that I have seen. So that's definitely going to be a raucous environment in Rocky Top. 3 straight home games, and these are 3 good games that they're. So I think Kentucky's defense will be able, to hold Tennessee, but they won't be able to hold Tennessee's offense for 4 quarters. So give me Tennessee in this matchup. And Chet is also going to go with Tennessee as well. Sets for us all rolling with Rocky Top. So with that, one more game left on week 9. Like I mentioned, a really condensed slate here in the SEC. Number 15, Ole Miss at Texas A&M. Both of these teams are really looking for a win. You would probably think that Ole Miss needs this win more, especially if they want to stay in the SEC West race, especially with Bama coming to town next week. So you got between Ole Miss and A&M.
I think Ole Miss bounces back in this one. I think Jackson Dart played pretty well, but LSU was able to contain him as a runner, and Zach Evans wasn't available or he didn't play. So a lot of the rush attack was on Quishon Judkins. So if they can get Evans back or work someone else in there to kind of give Judkins a breather here and there, I think the Ole Miss offense can be really good. And honestly, I thought they tried to throw the ball too much against LSU. I know A&M's a tough team to run the ball on, no doubt, but stick with your bread and butter and try to run the football early. And I think Ole Miss can probably get that done. And I think they win a close one here on the road. But like you said, A&M needs this win just as much. Both teams really do.
Yeah, I think that was really a question mark of why Ole Miss passed the ball so much. We'll see if Zach Evans is going to be back. I would assume he is. So I think that Ole Miss, like you mentioned, is going to go back to the bread and butter. This is going to be a close game. I could see this as a low-scoring game. I think that Ole Miss's defense, the past 2 weeks have been exposed, but I think that Texas A&M's offense is the right one for them. Haynes King got hurt, so not sure if he's going to be 100% in this one. So I know this game is in the 12th man, but I'm going to go with Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin in this one. I just trust that offense more than A&M right now. A&M's offense is stuck in the 1900s, so I'm going to go with Ole Miss on the road. And Chet is going to go against us. Actually, no, he's not. I thought that he was going to go with. I thought he was going to go with Texas A&M. He usually doesn't.
He pulled a fast one on us. He doesn't like either one of these teams.
Yeah, so all rolling with the Rebels in this one. So that will conclude our Week 9 games in the SEC. But with that, we'll move on to some more games as we move outside of the SEC here for a brief moment. And that is for you can go on over to www.righteousfelon.com and use promo code OCSN for 15% off the best beef jerky around. I know that Chet's been, clamoring for you to get Carolina Reaper. So I don't know if you that. Maybe if South Carolina goes like 10-2 and wins the SEC East, you could.
Yes, we'll do a live eating of it if they make the SEC championship game against LSU.
Okay. All right. So let's go on now to the top games outside of the SEC. We got a big one here, big noon kickoff. And this is arguably, whoever wins this one is going to be in the driver's seat in the East. You still have Michigan undefeated. So we have number 2 Ohio State at number 13 Penn State. We saw Penn State in a big game. They got blown out by Michigan. Ohio State pretty much has been running over everyone that they have played on their schedule. So you got between the Buckeyes and Nittany Lions.
This one's tough. I got familial ties on both sides of this one, Ohio State and Penn State. Always a tough one to pick, but I just can't get that Michigan game out of my head. I think Ohio State's probably better in Michigan, and Michigan curb stomped Penn State after it was close early. I think Penn State will battle back from that. I don't think they'll get completely blown out, but I just think Ohio State is the real deal, and I don't see them getting upset in the regular season.
Ohio State, if you haven't watched them, they are very legit. And, an interesting part is Jim Knowles is now their defensive coordinator. I think that defense, going back from last year's defense was hard to watch. They're improving. On the flip side, like you mentioned, Penn State, it's hard to get out that blowout loss at Michigan. I mean, Michigan just ran all over Ohio State. Not Ohio State, ran all over, Michigan. Ohio State has TreVeyon Henderson in the backfield that's had like 5 touchdowns, 4 touchdown games this year already. So they're prone to that. But this is at Penn State. And you know what? I'm going to go with the upset here. I'm going to go with Jacob's boys, go with Penn State, ride with Jacob. We're going to trust them. Might as well. I mean, I went 9-0, so why not go with a big upset?
Got to trust our podcast mate,
Yeah, to shake up the college football landscape. Why not? So I'm going to go with Penn State.
I'd like it.
And Chet's also going to ride with me as well. So
all right.
Looking like you're going to pick up yeah, you might be picking up an easy win here. Penn State doesn't show up like they did last week against Minnesota. So we will see. This is a big game in the Big Ten. So we'll be tuning in this one at 11 o'clock to open our Saturday slate. So now to another big game here in the Big 12. It seems like every week in the Big 12, there's a ranked versus ranked matchup. This week features number 9 Oklahoma State at number 22 Kansas State. Both of these teams, have one loss on the schedule. Kansas State now has 2 losses, one to Tulane, and then this past weekend against TCU where they blew a 28-10 lead. So who you got in this one between the Pokes and the Cats?
Well, this one's tough because, like you said, both teams lost recently and games that were decided at the very end of the game, or they had a lead and it was taken from them. For Oklahoma State, it was a really impressive win against Texas, but they had the heartbreaker against TCU, and then Kansas State can relate to that. They just lost to TCU themselves. Tough road trip to Manhattan, Kansas, but I do think Oklahoma State is the more talented offense, and I think that they will just be a little bit too much for that Kansas State defense.
Yeah, Oklahoma State was my preseason pick to win the Big 12, and has a lot of experience at the quarterback position. But like I mentioned on the Sports Scramble show, I'm going to go for an upset pick. This is my upset pick of the week. I'm going to go with K-State at home. It's always tough to beat K-State. You pretty much have to play a perfect game. But I just think that Oklahoma State's defense is not going to be able to stop Adrian Martinez. And they got Deuce Vaughn. That dude's a dude. So I'm going to go K-State at home.
I like it.
And Chet is also going to go focus. Oh, I'm loving this more. There we go.
This is your chance to get a game.
There we go. Yeah, because I don't know how confident I feel about rolling with Penn State, but we'll see. So 2 Oklahoma State and 1 Kansas State, as now we will travel to the Bounce House in Orlando and the American Conference. I don't even, the winner of this game will pretty much wrap up the division, but I think that Tulane, the bold prediction, I think that Tulane's going to win the American and get and represent the Group of 5 in the New Year's Six Bowl. So that's my bold prediction. Number 20, Cincinnati at UCF. I know that you and I have been high on the Cincinnati team for a while, but we haven't really talked about them since the Arkansas game. So let's talk about them now. Who you got in this American Athletic Conference game?
Yeah, I think quietly they've had a really good season. Survived a game against SMU. I was watching that one a little bit in between some games. So they seem to be building a really good program. It's been a good program for most of the last 20 years, and they seem primed to transition well into the Big 12, and UCF will be coming right there with them. Both of these schools will be up for that challenge, but one last matchup here in the American, and I think Cincinnati gets it done. I know it's a road game, but I'm going with the talent here.
Yeah, Cincinnati's, they lost a lot of talent, but I think that they are still, they have one of the best coaches in Luke Fickell in college football. So, UCF is coming off, of an abysmal loss on the road at East Carolina. They lost that game 37-14. They didn't really show up in that game. Cincinnati, on the other hand, got off to a big lead against SMU. SMU was able to come back, but the Bearcats were able to get it done. I just think that Cincinnati is more experienced in this one. UCF does an explosive offense with John Raleigh, the former Ole Miss quarterback. But I'm going to go with Cincy in this one. Go with the Bearcats on the road. It's going to be a hostile environment at the Bounce House, but UCF, I just don't really see it. They've just been too up and down for me. So we're both rolling with the Bearcats, but Chet is going to go the opposite way. He's going to go with UCF. So we'll see who's in this big battle in the AAC. So before we finish off here, our games here in week number 9, we have one more in the ACC. This is the ACC game of the week. Pittsburgh travels to number 21 North Carolina. This is a team that we haven't really talked about either, North Carolina. Their one loss comes to Notre Dame, but, in an Atlantic division where really no one wants to win at this rate, it's looking like North Carolina's running away with that one. Clemson's looking like it for sure in the other division. So who you got in the Pitt in North Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh could figure out a way to get to Charlotte. They would take a little bit of help, including a big win against North Carolina. But North Carolina, they seem pretty good to me. I mean, the offense we know is legit. The defense seems to be settling in. So I think they're as good of a shot as any to win the Atlantic. Or is it the Coastal? I always get them confused.
I don't know. It's mixed up.
They will be playing Clemson most likely in Charlotte.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I'm also going to go with North Carolina. Expect a lot of points in this one. North Carolina hasn't been able to stop anyone. So has Pitt. So two terrific quarterbacks, Keaton Slovis on the other side, and Drake May. That's a very underrated quarterback. He's been putting up some big numbers for them. So I'm going to go with Tar Heels at home. And Chet is also going to go with North Carolina as well. So all rolling with the Tar Heels this week. So that is our games both in the SEC and outside of the conference. So really good slate. We'll have a bigger slate next week for sure. So let's get into some hot topics. The first two are some news. First one is Texas A&M. The Aggies are suspending 3 football players, all being freshmen, and definitely for their locker room antics. So what is going on with this Texas A&M program? What needs to change?
I mean, this team just seems unorganized, and they don't have an approach year to year. I mean, it's just kind of funny at this point. They get all this hype. We believe the recruiting. Somehow they still get people to come to that campus far, far away from home. And I don't know. Jimbo Fisher gets them there, but then they do nothing with them. So I just think it could get real ugly for Texas A&M because of how NIL works and how the transfer portal goes these days. I mean, guys are going to buy into the vision as high schoolers. They're going to get there, realize it's not for them, and realize that they could start at LSU or Georgia or Alabama because those were teams that recruited them out of high school, and they'll gladly hop on over there and contribute. So they got to figure out something. I mean, this is 3 to 4 years now where they're supposed to contend and they're not.
Yeah, just keep in mind, this was a team that was season number 6 and had the number 1 recruiting class, but I would not be shocked if you start seeing, some of those players get their names in the transfer portal. We already saw one, their punter, he already was in the transfer portal. So, and just saying, Kevin Sumlin and Jimbo Fisher, same record going through their first couple of years. So we'll see what they do down there in Aggieland. But right now, it's not looking good. We'll see. Hopefully they can get into a bowl game, salvage their season. But they got some challenging games ahead of them. So the next hot topic, I feel like we see this hot topic literally every year around this game. Kirby Smart advocates for the Florida-Georgia home and home. Do you like, the neutral site game, or would you rather see this being a home and home?
I mean, I'm kind of neutral on it. I like I kind of like the uniqueness of playing in Jacksonville. I think it makes sense from a geography standpoint. A little bit closer to Florida than it is to Georgia, but there's a heavy fan base presence for either school in that area, and it kind of lets the people from South Carolina and Alabama get there a little bit more easily. But, also it's college football. It's the middle of the season. It's kind of weird to go on a kind of a road trip, kind of not a road trip. So I know I'm straddling the fence here and not giving you an answer. I don't mind it, but yeah, it would feel more like college football if they played home and home.
Yeah, if you really think about it, the players that go to Florida and Georgia, they never get to play, like Georgia never gets to play at the Swamp, and then Florida players never get to play at Sanford Stadium. So, that could be an argument for that as well. I just feel like, the 50-50 split, that, Texas and Oklahoma does the same thing. So I really don't have an issue with it. But, to me, I prefer the home and homes over the neutral site games. But I think for rivalry games, it works. Especially in Jacksonville, it's not like, you know, it's not far from both universities. It's pretty even. Well, when you think about geographically, but Kirby Smart, has been doing this. I know that he, advocates that for the recruiting purposes because it gives him, an extra visit. So, I don't really see them changing it. But if they change it to a home and home, then I think that fans of both schools will like that as well. So our next two hot topics are question based. So if you're in the comments, if you want to drop a comment, definitely go for it. You can, answer these questions as well. So I'm going to ask you, by the end of the year, how many SEC teams, can make the playoff? Right now, realistically, there's probably three teams, all in the top 10, Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama. Probably out of those three, how many get into the playoff?
I mean, I think there's definitely a situation for two teams to make it. We're probably going to have a one-loss team on the East that won't get to play in Atlanta. And as long as that Tennessee-Georgia game's close, I think that the loser in that one could deserve a shot to make the playoff, especially if it's Tennessee who loses and they have the head-to-head win over Alabama. But I don't know if the situation is going to arise for that this year. I think that it might be 4 conference champions because there's a good chance Ohio State will be undefeated. There's a good chance the SEC champion will be undefeated. You really got to go with the SEC champion, regardless if they're undefeated or not, in my opinion. And then out west, I guess there is no more undefeated teams, so that does kind of help. But Clemson will probably go undefeated as well, and TCU still has a chance to go undefeated. So, I mean, there's a path for 4 teams to be undefeated. And then there's the argument about a one-loss conference champ over a one-loss SEC team. We see that almost every year. So the path is there for 2. I think we're going to see 1, which is a shame because there's 3 or 4 really good SEC teams.
Yeah, I mean, you could arguably say that like those 3 teams are, the 3 top teams, not only in the SEC, but in the country. But yeah, there's a lot of paths, there's a lot of scenarios. So we'll get into our playoff predictions whenever the college football playoff rankings. We usually do that every year, so definitely be on the lookout for that. So the next question, I know that y'all brought this up. I listened to the Sports Scramble podcast on Sunday. Y'all brought this up about the tailgating atmosphere, so I figured I would do it for the SEC. So I'm going to ask you, you've obviously been to probably just South Carolina and LSU's atmosphere in the SEC, but who has the best tailgating atmosphere in the conference? And I'm sure that our fans would probably have different answers as well.
Well, okay, so I've been to South Carolina, like you said, been to LSU, obviously. I've been up to Knoxville for a game, and I have been in Alabama on a game day. I did not go to the game, but got to see the tailgates and all that. So definitely have some rounds to make. I'd really like to go to all the stadiums at some point. Ones that stand out to me, Georgia and Auburn are two that I'd like to take in. But you always hear about LSU and the food, and I really do think our fans are pretty they're good hosts. They're hospitable. So it seems like an obvious answer to me is LSU, but I would have to think that schools like Georgia and Auburn, they know how to do it too. And I think that the college town vibe really appeals to me, and I'd like to take in a game. And then Ole Miss, they go all in. They bring in wedding rentals and stuff. So that'd be a good one as well. But, I think that for now, I got to say LSU, but really just in general, the conference from top to bottom does a great job. And it would be cool to hit all the stops eventually.
Yeah, I know that, outside, conferences, like the Big Ten, you're like, oh, but SEC, let's be real, has the best tailgating some of the better stadiums in the conference. But my mom agrees, LSU all the way. Best tailgating and food. I mean, as an LSU fan growing up, there's really only one school that I can really say. Like, I've been to Mississippi State tailgates as well. You know, they get really. I mean, there's tents pretty much for miles and miles. You know, every school does that as well. But you know, I've been to some tailgates outside. You know, the Group of Five. I've been to South Alabama tailgate. Been to Southern Miss, and that's definitely a different tailgate. But man, the SEC is a different beast when it comes to tailgating, because all fan bases, get up early in the morning, get drunk probably by kickoff, and then it's time for the games to get going. Just a rowdier atmosphere in those stadiums. So there's no wrong answer for this, but yeah, there's a lot of atmospheres out there that we haven't really been accustomed to. Like a Georgia and Auburn. So I'm sure that fans of those schools will have a say in that. So we'll leave that for an open question to all of our fans out there. So that'll be it for our show. We want to thank everyone, leaving comments, viewing in to the show every week. So that'll do it for us here for week 9 of SEC Talk. So next week we will review, like I mentioned, a condensed week 9. It was still, really good slate. We have that one big game in Knoxville, Kentucky, Tennessee. Then we have some other games that have some critical matchups as well. But next week, I feel like, we have Georgia versus Tennessee. Then that's going to be the game of the year. I feel like in the SEC, that's going to be whoever wins that one. It's probably going to be in the SEC East, and then in Baton Rouge, we have Alabama and LSU. The winner of that, we'll probably see them in Atlanta as well. So by, come time like next week, we could find out, who's going to, what 2 teams are going to face off in the SEC championship. So week 10, a huge week, and it's already crazy that we're getting to the double-digit week. So it's flying by, but we're going to try and enjoy the last few weeks of college football season. So hope everyone enjoys the great rest of your week, and also happy Halloween as well. Enjoy your time trick-or-treating or, going to some Halloween parties on the weekend. So we'll see you back here next time on Tuesday night for SEC Talk. Good night for now.